Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a rogue HOA president uses a drone to spy on a man who refuses to bow to her rules, things crash, literally. After the drone smashes into his truck, he takes her to court in the most outrageous suburban showdown you've ever seen: privacy, power, revenge, and brisket. My name is Garrett Wells. I'm 37 years old, and 3 years ago, I traded the concrete suffocation of city life for something raw, real, and mine. I bought a 4-acre plot tucked deep into the wooded hills of Sonoma County, California, land that doesn't hum with car alarms or HOA drama, just birdsong and the occasional wind chime from my porch. The house that sits on it? A crumbling shell when I found it. Now, it's a handcrafted sanctuary. Every nail, every shingle, every damn piece of siding put in by me. Blood, sweat, stubbornness, and maybe one broken thumb. It was worth it. The nearest development is a cookie-cutter HOA-controlled neighborhood called Lakeview Estates, just a few hundred yards downhill. Neatly trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, people who wave with one hand and dial the HOA with the other. I didn't think much of it when I moved in. They had their rules, I had my space, and between us, miles of principle. That all changed when I met Karen Morgan. Karen was exactly what you'd expect a self-appointed HOA president to be. Immaculate bob haircut, clipboard in one hand, iced coffee in the other, and an unshakable belief that the world should operate by her spreadsheet. We met the day I started erecting my 10-foot cedar privacy fence. I was halfway through digging the third post hole when I saw her standing on the edge of her development's paved road, arms crossed like she was conducting a zoning inquisition. You do realize that kind of fence violates the visibility code in Section 6.2 of our community standards? She called out, as if reading from scripture. I stood up, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and walked over. Ma'am, this is my land, not part of your HOA. Your rules stop at that curb. She didn't like that, not one bit. From that moment, it was like I'd become her personal obsession. I wasn't just a neighbor, I was an anomaly. An unregulated, unapologetic variable on her gridded landscape. And worse, I had declared independence loudly. A week later, I found a laminated pamphlet in my mailbox. Lakeview Living: Guidelines for a Harmonious Community. Inside was a polite invitation to join the HOA voluntarily, with notes scribbled in pink pen. We noticed your exterior color could use softening. Consider beige. I laughed. Then I shredded it. But something in Karen shifted that week. She stopped being passive-aggressive and started curious. She began taking walks past my property, slow ones, with long pauses near the fence. Occasionally, I'd catch the glint of a phone camera. I ignored it at first. After all, I had nothing to hide. But in hindsight, maybe that's exactly why she hated me. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was just a kid messing around. A drone, small, black, silent, floating just above the tree line on the western edge of my property. It hovered for maybe 20 seconds, then zipped off like a dragonfly, startled by thunder. No big deal, I told myself. Probably one of the Lakeview teenagers playing with their new toy. But the next day, it returned, this time closer. I was sanding down the side of my workshop when the subtle whir of rotors caught my attention. The drone hung there, perfectly still, 20 feet above the patio. I froze, watching it watch me. It didn't move for a full minute, and then, just as calmly as it came, it drifted backwards and disappeared over the fence line. That night, I installed my old trail cam on the patio and told myself I was being paranoid, that I wasn't the kind of guy who thought about surveillance and airspace violations, but maybe I needed to be. The drone came back, again, and again. Morning, afternoon, dusk, always from the same direction, always hovering, observing. It wasn't just passing by, it was casing me, watching the patterns of my life. And it wasn't just me anymore. My wife would be sipping coffee on the deck, only to look up and see it watching her. My daughter, 7 years old, was playing with chalk when it hovered low enough for her to wave at it. That was the moment my blood turned to ice. I upgraded the trail cam to a full security system with motion detection, put up a second camera over the driveway and another by the back door. Within 48 hours, I had time-stamped footage of the drone performing slow, lazy figure eights over the hot tub, pausing directly above our master bedroom window, circling my workshop like it was scouting for structural flaws. By then, I was beyond frustrated. I tried to trace the drone's path, but it always dipped below the tree line before crossing into Lakeview's residential zone. That's when I did something I hadn't done since moving here. I walked back down to the HOA board's bulletin board near the entrance. I pretended to read the pet rules while watching which houses had antenna arrays, remote receivers, satellite rigs. One stood out, Karen's. A massive antenna mount protruded from the edge of her roof like some cybernetic limb. I squinted and saw a brand logo, a high-end model with flight telemetry control. It wasn't proof, but my gut started ringing like a fire alarm. 2 days later, it all escalated. It was a Saturday, windy, dry, that eerie kind of Northern California breeze that makes pine trees moan and loose shingles flutter. I had just waxed my new Ford Raptor, the pride of my garage, and parked it outside the shop. I was inside organizing paint cans when I heard it, the unmistakable sputter of a rotor in distress, then a crack, a metallic thud, and the screech of something scraping steel. I bolted out. There it was, the drone, smashed across the hood of my truck, one rotor still twitching like a dying insect. Scratches gouged across the windshield, and a deep, cratered dent sank into the center of the hood like a crater on Mars. And there, fixed to its underbelly, a label that made my jaw lock. Property of Lakeview HOA, President M.K. Morgan. I stared at that little sticker like it was a confession written in Sharpie. No more guesses, no more theories. I had the proof, and about $70,000 worth of cosmetic and mechanical damage staring me in the face. I took a photo, then another. Then I picked up the drone, brought it inside, and laid it on the kitchen table like it was evidence in a federal case. I called the police. It didn't take long for the officers to show up. 2 deputies from the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. I met them halfway up the gravel drive, drone in hand like I was delivering a cursed artifact. One of them raised an eyebrow when I placed it in an evidence bag, pointing out the Property of Lakeview HOA label like it was a neon sign. They took my statement, snapped photos of the Raptor's dented hood, and told me they'd file a preliminary report while sending the drone off to their tech unit for data extraction. They were surprisingly interested in it, especially after I mentioned the repeated flyovers and my security camera footage. Apparently, illegal drone surveillance is a growing concern, especially in rural properties adjacent to overzealous HOAs. While they were still on site, I made a decision. I'd give Karen Morgan one chance. One, to make this right. I didn't want a war. Not yet. Just compensation and accountability. I printed off the vehicle damage estimate from the body shop, $71,385. Thank you, custom paint and hood panel. Grabbed stills from my security footage and tossed it all into a manila folder. Then I changed my shirt, took a deep breath, and walked down to Lakeview Estates like a man preparing to negotiate a hostage release. Karen's house was a tidy 2-story colonial with symmetrical hedges that looked like they feared consequences. Her porch featured 2 identical flower pots and a miniature HOA flag proudly waving in the breeze. I knocked once, twice. The door opened before I could knock a 3rd time. She wore a stiff pastel blouse, a name tag, seriously, and a look of professional concern wrapped in irritation. "Mr. Wells," she said with a tight smile, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" I held up the folder. "I'd like to resolve something quietly." She blinked, then opened the door just wide enough for the scent of espresso to drift through. "I believe one of your HOA drones, this one specifically, crashed on my property and caused significant damage to my vehicle. I'd like to resolve it civilly, privately." Her smile stayed, but the warmth faded. "I see," she said. "Would you like to come in for a moment?" I followed her into a kitchen that looked like it had been staged for a real estate brochure, all sterile chrome and white counters. She poured herself another iced coffee from a carafe, not offering me anything, then leaned back against the sink, arms folded. "I'm going to stop you right there," she said. "Yes, the HOA drone program is a new initiative for community safety, voted in by the board, authorized by our charter, but any incidental accidents—" "You flew over my property," I cut in, keeping my voice level, "repeatedly, without my consent. You hovered over my bedroom window, my deck, my kid. Then the drone crashed into my truck. That's not incidental. That's an invasion and vandalism." Karen took a long sip from her coffee. "If you're suggesting the HOA is liable for what was essentially a wind-related malfunction, I'm suggesting you personally piloted it," I said. "The logs, the footage, they're with the police now. It's going to come out." She froze. just for a split second, then laughed, soft, dry, theatrical. "You really think this is going to go anywhere?" she said, stepping closer. "You're not even part of the HOA. You're an outsider. If you pursue this, we will file for defamation, harassment, and public endangerment. I have 3 board members willing to swear that drone never crossed the fence." I opened the folder, showed her the still image of the drone, mid-hover, with my property clearly visible beneath it. She glanced down, and without warning, threw the last of her iced coffee directly at me. The shock hit before the cold. Coffee splattered across my chest and face, sticky caramel drizzle sliding down my collar. My hands clenched around the folder. "I think this conversation's over," she hissed. "Good luck with your little crusade." I stood there in silence for a beat. Not angry, not embarrassed, just done. I turned, walked out her door, back down her perfect brick path, and didn't look back. That was the last straw. No more diplomacy, no more neighborly patience. The gloves were off. I was going to court. I had barely been home for an hour, the coffee still drying on my shirt collar, when I heard it, that all too familiar mechanical hum in the sky. I stepped out onto the porch in disbelief, and there it was. The same drone, same body, same noise, same slow, predatory glide over my tree line. I stared, open-mouthed. After everything, the crash, the damage, the police report, the confrontation, Karen actually launched another drone over my property. It floated low and deliberate, passing over the garden, scanning the backyard like it was conducting a real estate appraisal. I watched it pause above the fire pit, drift toward the workshop, then loop back around, right over the raptor, which was now wearing a tarp like a wounded soldier. I didn't hesitate. I went inside, grabbed my phone, and dialed the sheriff's department. "This is Garrett Wells. You have a drone surveillance case on file from earlier today. The HOA launched another one. It's over my house right now." The dispatcher's tone changed immediately. Same model, same route, same altitude, probably the same operator. They dispatched a unit within 20 minutes. When the deputy pulled up, the drone was still in the air, orbiting like a hawk on a leash. I flagged him down, and we both stood in the backyard watching it hover above us. The deputy radioed it in and pulled out a small tracking device. Clearly, they'd come prepared this time. He scanned the drone's transponder signal and smirked. Same ID tag as the last one. "This thing is HOA property, all right." I kept my mouth shut, letting the man do his job. Then came the best part. The deputy stepped forward, held up a portable drone jammer, a device I didn't even know local police had, and within seconds, the drone dropped altitude and landed softly near my garden path like a mechanical chicken giving up. The deputy walked over, scooped it up, and placed it in a large padded case. I thought that was it, but of course it wasn't, because Karen Morgan arrived. Her white SUV screeched to a stop halfway down my driveway. She practically stormed out of the car, blouse wrinkled, HOA lanyard bouncing against her chest like it had battlefield clearance. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she snapped, striding across my gravel like she owned the mineral rights. The deputy turned calmly. "Ma'am, we're seizing this drone as evidence in an ongoing investigation. You're advised to remain civil." Karen's face contorted into a smirk-laced snarl. "You can't seize private HOA property just because some backwoods rebel complains about surveillance. That's—" "Ma'am," the deputy interrupted. "We have recorded footage, transponder confirmation, and an active report on file. This drone has violated FAA guidelines and state privacy law. If you'd like to contest the seizure, you can do so in court." Karen stepped closer, way too close, and jabbed a finger toward the padded case. That drone was not programmed for illegal activity. I should know. I wrote the damn route. My eyebrows practically hit the brim of my hat. The deputy blinked once, jotted something down in his notepad, and calmly asked, "Would you mind repeating that?" Karen suddenly froze, realizing what she'd just admitted. You're twisting my words." "I recorded them," the deputy replied. For a moment, there was silence, just the wind and the soft click of a pen against a notepad. "I'll be contacting my attorney," she spat. "Please do," he said with a nod. "He'll want to see the data logs, too." Karen turned on her heel and stormed back to her SUV, leaving a trail of gravel and bruised ego behind her. The deputy looked at me and sighed. "She's a peach," he muttered. "More like a pit," I said. As he packed the drone into the back of his patrol car, he glanced back one last time. "Mr. Wells, I'd recommend filing a full civil complaint. You've got enough now to make it stick." "Oh," I said, already picturing the courtroom. "That's the plan." Courtrooms have a strange kind of gravity to them, like churches for people who believe in paperwork more than prayer. When I stepped through the double doors of the Sonoma County Courthouse that morning, wearing a clean button-down and a steel will, I felt that weight settle on my shoulders. Only I wasn't there to kneel. I was there to win. The case was officially titled Wells v. Lakeview, HOA, and Morgan, but the press had dubbed it the Drone War. Local news crews had set up outside, capturing shots of my truck's cratered hood and looping snippets of drone footage hovering just above my daughter's play area. I didn't ask for the spotlight, but I wasn't about to shy away from it either. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about privacy, property, and the right to sit shirtless on your deck without ending up in someone's HOA database. Karen arrived 30 minutes late, as if she were trying to make a grand entrance. She wore a beige power suit and a look that tried to say, "in control," but couldn't quite hide the twitch in her left eye. Behind her was a polished legal team, 3 attorneys in tailored suits and grim expressions. I had one, Amber Jennings, and believe me, she was enough. Amber wasn't just sharp, she was a scalpel. With a voice like a librarian and a stare like a sniper, she'd built a case so airtight you could have launched it into orbit. The opening statements were polite, almost boring. HOA counsel tried to spin the whole thing as a misunderstanding, a community safety initiative gone slightly off course, an unfortunate equipment failure, no malicious intent, no harm intended. Then Amber stood up, clicked a remote, and projected a still image onto the screen. The drone dead center, hovering directly above my master bedroom window. "Let me be clear," she said, her tone like glass slicing across marble. "This is not community safety. This is illegal surveillance." From that moment on, the courtroom belonged to us. We brought in the flight logs, GPS data, video records from my security system showing the drone visiting my property over 37 separate occasions. FAA experts testified that Lakeview HOA had no authorization for private aerial surveillance. A forensic tech from the sheriff's office confirmed the drone's onboard memory had been manually programmed by login credentials tied to an iPad registered to Karen Morgan. But the real fireworks came when we introduced the HOA meeting transcripts, dug up by Amber through a subpoena. There, in black and white minutes, was Karen's voice. "If Garrett Wells keeps building without permits, we'll monitor every inch of his backyard. Let's see how he likes that." You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Karen's lawyers tried to object, claimed the meeting was informal, said the quote was taken out of context. The judge, an older man with the slow drawl of someone who'd heard every excuse in the book, raised an eyebrow and said, "What context would make that okay?" Then it was Karen's turn on the stand. She was confident at first. She smiled, she deflected, she even managed a light chuckle when asked about the HOA drone initiative. But then Amber stepped up with one simple question. "Ms. Morgan, who initiated the flight path for Drone Unit 3 the morning it crashed onto Mr. Wells' vehicle." I don't recall," Karen said. Amber tapped her iPad. "Would it help to see the user log from your device? The one showing a manual launch at 8:14 a.m., geotagged from your living room?" Karen blinked. The room watched. "That doesn't mean it was me," she said. "I may have left the device open. Would you like to explain why your voice was captured in the onboard mic, saying, 'Circle the workshop again'?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Karen's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes twitched. Her hands gripped the edge of the witness box like she was trying not to slide into some invisible abyss. For a moment, just a breath, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the verdict came like thunder. Guilty of unlawful surveillance, guilty of property damage, guilty of personal harassment. The HOA was ordered to pay $150,000 in damages. Karen personally was fined an additional $10,000 for obstruction and bad faith conduct. The judge concluded with a ruling I'll never forget. Lakeview HOA has overstepped its bounds, violated the rights of a private citizen, and attempted to hide behind the thin veil of community governance. This is not just misconduct. It is authoritarian arrogance, and it will not be tolerated. Karen sat there, unmoving, her expression frozen somewhere between shock and denial. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. She just stared at the verdict papers like they were written in a language she no longer understood. As I walked past her on my way out, she didn't look up. The queen of the neighborhood, dethroned by her own obsession. The war was over. But I had one more thing to do. The morning after the verdict, the air felt lighter, not just around the house, in my lungs. Like I'd finally taken off a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. The silence outside was different too. No mechanical buzz, no surveillance rotors, no invisible audience recording my every stretch on the porch. Just birds, wind, and my daughter laughing while chasing our golden retriever across the freshly mowed lawn. The first thing I did was retrieve the broken drone from the sheriff's office. They offered to keep it as evidence for potential appeals, but I politely declined. That drone had a new destiny. I mounted it in a custom oak frame. Blades cracked, shell scorched, label property of Lakeview HOA, President M.K. Morgan still intact. It hangs now in my garage, above my workbench, next to my dad's old wrench set. There's a plaque under it that reads, "She watched, she fell, we rose." It makes me laugh every time I grab a tool. As for the money, the $150,000, it didn't just go toward fixing the Raptor, though she got a pristine new hood and a fresh ceramic coat. I donated a portion to a local group that helps homeowners fight abusive HOAs. The rest? Let's just say my backyard workshop now has solar panels, a wood lathe, and a vintage pinball machine that cost more than I'd like to admit. But the most satisfying part? Watching the slow implosion of Lakeview HOA's empire. First came the resignations. Karen naturally was forced to step down immediately, both from her role as HOA president and from her position on the county's neighborhood advisory board. Her reputation didn't just take a hit, it flatlined. Turns out, people don't like being represented by someone whose idea of community engagement involves violating airspace laws. Next was the HOA board itself. Half the members who had backed Karen's drone initiative either quit or were voted out within a month. Several residents, emboldened by the trial, started coming forward with their own stories. Fines for mailbox paint, threats over flower pot placement, even forced lawn inspections during birthdays. One neighbor confided to me that Karen once told her to rotate her patio furniture to match the HOA compass alignment. You can't make this stuff up. Then came the audit. Yes, the county, prompted by the judge's ruling, initiated a financial and operational audit of Lakeview HOA. What they found was a patchwork of petty fines, misused funds, and a neighborhood surveillance fund that had never been disclosed to residents. Karen had used HOA dues to upgrade the drone tech, buy signal amplifiers, and even fund a custom monogram controller with her initials engraved in gold. That little luxury did not sit well with taxpayers. Lakeview's image, once a beacon of suburban excellence, became a punchline on local talk radio. Real estate prices in the area dipped temporarily, not because of me, but because no one wanted to live under Orwellian scrutiny. And Karen. She didn't vanish exactly, but she might as well have. She was spotted once 2 weeks after the ruling at the town farmer's market wearing sunglasses and a floppy sun hat like a retired soap opera villain. A child accidentally ran into her cart, and she muttered something about lawyers. I heard she tried applying to another HOA leadership position across town and was promptly turned down due to philosophical misalignment. Eventually, the house went up for sale. The listing didn't mention the drone lawsuit, though someone did leave a cheeky Yelp review of the neighborhood that simply read, 5 stars for drama, -2 for air traffic violations. Ironically, the Lakeview community actually got better after the purge. A new HOA board was elected, friendlier, less militant. They repealed the surveillance initiative, reduced fine structures, and even threw a block party where I was invited as a guest of honor. One woman told me, "You didn't just win in court, you freed us." I guess I did. And yet, for all the press, all the courtroom drama, all the speeches about rights and justice, nothing felt more satisfying than walking into my garage each morning, glancing up at that broken drone, and knowing she watched me. Now everyone watched her fall. It all ended the way most great revolutions should, with grilled meat, fireworks, and a 6-foot inflatable drone wearing a pair of sunglasses. We called it the Freedom Cookout, though unofficially everyone in the neighborhood had started referring to it as the Bye-Bye Karen Bash. The new HOA board gave me their blessing to host it at the open field bordering Lakeview and my property, a symbolic no man's land where fences once divided and drones once hovered. Now, It was a party zone. I dragged out my biggest smoker, loaded it with hickory wood, and smoked 2 briskets to perfection. My wife made her famous jalapeno cornbread, and my daughter ran a lemonade stand with prices that somehow fluctuated depending on whether you were wearing khakis. Neighbors poured in from both sides, former adversaries, new allies, and a few who had watched the courtroom saga like a Netflix miniseries. They brought folding chairs, potato salad, and stories. One guy came wearing a shirt that said, "My HOA doesn't spy, it grills." But the highlight? That came at sundown. I had a friend, ex-Air Force, great with RC gear, rig up a fake drone that we launched into the air during the party. It rose up slowly, silently, blinking red and blue. The crowd fell quiet, and then, right on cue, it began playing. Loudly, "Eye of the Tiger." It made a lazy circle overhead before deploying a small parachute and dropping a single object into the field. It landed with a thud. Everyone ran over. It was a plastic folder labeled Lakeview HOA Rulebook 2022 edition. Inside, nothing but toilet paper. The crowd lost it. One guy laughed so hard he dropped a whole tray of baked beans. Even the new HOA president doubled over, tears in her eyes. "Justice," she whispered, "has never smelled more like mesquite." Later that night, we lit up the sky with fireworks. Real ones, loud, colorful, completely HOA approved this time. Kids danced, dogs barked, people hugged strangers. For the first time since I moved out here, I felt like part of something bigger than just my land and my walls. And right before midnight, I stood on the tailgate of my truck and raised a glass. To fences that stand tall, I said, to drones that crash hard, and to neighbors who finally learned that freedom smells a lot like smoked brisket. The cheer that followed echoed through the trees, across property lines, and through the night like a promise. Karen may have started the war, but we threw the party.